Section 37 of Poems of American History, the Colonial Era. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Joseph Tabler. Poems of American History, the Colonial Era. Chapter 8, The Struggle for the Continent, Part 6. After Braddock's defeat, the Pennsylvania and Virginia frontiers were left for a time to the ravages of the Indians. The colonies were slow to defend themselves, and could get no aid whatever from England, who had her hands full elsewhere. Ode to the Inhabitants of Pennsylvania, September 30, 1756. Published in the Pennsylvania Gazette, September 30, 1756. Ode to the Inhabitants of Pennsylvania. Still shall the tyrant scourge of Gaul with wasteful rage resistless fall on Britain's slumbering race? Still shall she wave her bloody hand and threatening banners o'er this land, to Britain's fell disgrace? And not one generous chieftain rise, who dares the frown of war despise, and treacherous fear disclaim, his country's ruin to oppose, to hurl destruction on her foes, and blast their rising fame? In Britain's cause, with valor fired, Braddock, unhappy chief, expired, and claimed a nation's tear. Nor could Oswego's bulwark stand the fury of a savage band, though Schuyler's arm was there. Still shall this motley murderous crew their deep destructive arts pursue, and general horror spread? No! See Britannia's genius rise? Swift o'er the Atlantic foam she flies, and lifts her laureled head. Lo, streaming through the dear blue sky, great Loudon's awful banners fly, in British pomp displayed. Soon shall the gallant chief advance, before him shrink the sons of France, confounded and dismayed. Then rise, illustrious Britons, rise! Great freedom calls, pursue her voice, and save your country's shame. Let every hand, for Britain armed, and every breast with virtue warmed, aspire at deathless fame. But, chief, let Pennsylvania wake, and on her foes let terror shake, their gloomy troops defy, for lo, her smoking farms and plains, her captured youths and murdered swains, for vengeance louder cry. Why should we seek inglorious rest, or sink with thoughtless ease oppressed, while war insults so near? While ruthless, fierce, athirst for blood, Bellona's sons, a desperate brood, in furious bands appear. Rouse, rouse at once, and boldly chase from their deep haunts the savage race, till they confess you men. Let other Armstrongs grace the field, let other slaves before them yield and tremble round Duquesne. And thou, our chief and martial guide, of worth approved, of valor tried, in many a hard campaign, O Denny, warmed with British fire, our inexperienced troops inspire, and conquest's laurels gain. Pennsylvania Gazette, September 30, 1756. No author given. Meanwhile, things were in a troubled condition in Acadia, where the so-called French neutrals were discovered to be in arms against England. Every resource of patience and persuasion had been used to secure their loyalty to Great Britain, but in vain. At last it was decided to disperse them among the southern provinces, and the deportation began in October. At the end of 2 months, about 6,000 of the Acadians had been sent away and their homes destroyed. The Embarkation, from Evangeline, by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. October 8, 1755. The Embarkation. 4 times the sun had risen and set, and now on the 5th day cheerily called the cock to the sleeping maids of the farmhouse. Soon o'er the yellow fields in silent and mournful procession came from the neighboring hamlets and farms the Acadian women, driving in ponderous wains their household goods to the seashore, pausing and looking back to gaze once more on their dwellings, ere they were shut from sight by the winding road and the woodland. Close at their sides their children ran, and urged on the oxen, while in their little hands they clasped some fragments of playthings. Thus to Gaspereau's mouth they hurried, and there on the sea-beach, piled in confusion, lay the household goods of the peasants. All day long between the shore and the ships did the boats ply. All day long the wains came laboring down from the village. Late in the afternoon, when the sun was near to his setting, echoed far o'er the fields came the roll of drums from the churchyard. Thither the women and children thronged. On a sudden the church doors opened, and forth came the guard, and marching in gloomy procession followed the long imprisoned but patient Acadian farmers. Even as pilgrims who journey afar from their homes and their country sing as they go, and in singing forget they are weary and war-worn, so with songs on their lips the Acadian peasants descended down from the church to the shore, amid their wives and their daughters. Foremost the young men came, and raising together their voices, sang with tremulous lips a chant of the Catholic missions. Sacred Heart of the Saviour, O inexhaustible fountain, fill our hearts this day with strength and submission and patience. Then the old men as they marched, and the women that stood by the wayside, joined in the sacred psalm, and the birds in the sunshine above them mingled their notes therewith, like voices of spirits departed. Thus to the Gaspereau's mouth moved on that mournful procession. Their disorder prevailed, and the tumult and stir of embarking. Busily plied the freighted boats, and in the confusion wives were torn from their husbands, and mothers too late saw their children left on the land, extending their arms with wildest entreaties. So unto separate ships were Basil and Gabriel carried, while in despair on the shore Evangeline stood with her father. Half the task was not done when the sun went down, and the twilight deepened and darkened around, and in haste the refluent ocean fled away from the shore, and left the line of the sand beach covered with waifs of the tide, with kelp and the slippery seaweed. Farther back in the midst of the household goods and the wagons, like to a gipsy camp or a leaguer after a battle, all escape cut off by the sea, and the sentinels near them, lay encamped for the night the houseless Acadian farmers. Back to its nethermost caves retreated the bellowing ocean, dragging adown the beach the rattling pebbles, and leaving inland and far up the shore the stranded boats of the sailors. Then as the night descended, the herds returned from their pastures. Sweet was the moist still air, with the odor of milk from their udders. Lowing they waited, and long, at the well-known bars of the farmyard, waited and looked in vain for the voice and the hand of the milkmaid. Silence reigned in the streets. From the church no angelus sounded, rose no smoke from the roofs, and gleamed no lights from the windows. Suddenly rose from the south a light, as in autumn the blood-red moon climbs the crystal walls of heaven, and o'er the horizon Titan-like stretches its 100 hands upon the mountain and the meadow, seizing the rocks and the rivers, and piling huge shadows together. Broader and ever broader it gleamed on the roofs of the village, gleamed on the sky and sea and the ships that lay in the roadstead. Columns of shining smoke uprose, and flashes of flame were thrust through their folds and withdrawn like the quivering hands of a martyr. Then as the wind seized the gleeds and the burning thatch, and uplifting whirled them aloft through the air, at once from 100 housetops started the sheeted smoke with flashes of flame intermingled. These things beheld in dismay the crowd on the shore and on shipboard. Speechless at first they stood, then cried aloud in their anguish, "We shall behold no more our homes in the village of Grand Pré." Loud on a sudden the cocks began to crow in the farmyards, thinking the day had dawned, and anon the lowing of cattle came on the evening breeze, by the barking of dogs interrupted. Then rose a sound of dread, such as startles the sleeping encampments far in the western prairies or forests that skirt the Nebraska, when the wild horses affrighted sweep by with the speed of the whirlwind, or the loud bellowing herds of buffaloes rush to the river. Such was the sound that arose on the night as the herds and the horses broke through their folds and fences and madly rushed o'er the meadows. Lo, with a mournful sound, like the voice of a vast congregation, solemnly answered the sea, and mingled its roar with the dirges. 'Twas the returning tide, that afar from the waste of the ocean, with the first dawn of the day, came heaving and hurrying landward. Then recommenced once more the stir and noise of embarking, and with the ebb of the tide the ships sailed out of the harbor, leaving behind them the dead on the shore and the village in ruins. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. In July 1758, an army of 15,000, under General James Abercrombie and Brigadier Lord Howe, attempted to take Ticonderoga, where Montcalm was stationed at the head of about 3,000 men. Lord Howe, the very life of the army, was killed in the first skirmish, and Abercrombie handled the army so badly that it was repulsed with a loss of nearly 2,000 and fled in a panic. The French loss was less than 400, and the victory was hailed as one of the greatest ever achieved by French arms in America. On the defeat at Ticonderoga, or Carillon, July 8, 1758. London Magazine. No author. Neglected long had been my useless lyre, and heartfelt grief repressed the poet's fire. But roused by dire alarms of wasting war, again, O Muse, the solemn dirge prepare, and join the widow's, orphan's, parents' tear. Unwept, unsung, shall Britain's chiefs remain, doomed in this stranger clime to bleed in vain. Here a last refuge hapless Braddock found, when the grim savage gave the deadly wound. Ah, hide, Monongahela, thy hateful head, still as thy waves roll near the injured dead, on whose gore-moistened banks the numerous slain now spring in vegetative life again, whilst their wan ghosts, as night's dark gloom prevail, murmur to whistling winds the mournful tale. Cease, cease, ye grisly forms, nor wail the past. Lo, a new scene of death exceeds the last. The empurpled fields of Carillon survey, rich with the spoils of one disastrous day. Bold to the charge the ready veterans stood, and thrice repelled, as oft the fight renewed, till, life's warm current drained, they sunk in blood. Unchecked their ardor, unallayed their fire. See Beaver, Proby, Rutherford expire. Silent Britannia's tardy thunder lay, while clouds of Gallic smoke obscured the day. The intrepid race nursed on the mountain's brow, or leap the mound and dare the astonished foe, whilst Albion's sons, mowed down in ranks, bemoan their much-loved country's wrongs, nor feel their own. Cheerless they hear the drum discordant beat, and with slow motion sullenly retreat. But where wert thou, oh, first in martial fame, whose early cares distinguished praises claim, who every welcome toil didst gladly share, and taught the enervate warrior want to bear? Illustrious Howe, whose every deed confessed the patriot wish that filled thy generous breast. Alas, too swift to explore the hostile land, thou didst sad victim to an ambushed band, nor ere this hour of wild confusion viewed, like Braddock falling in the pathless wood. Still near the spot where thy pale corse is laid, may the fresh laurel spread its amplest shade. Still may thy name be uttered with a sigh, and the big drops swell every grateful eye. Oh, would each leader who deplores thy fate thy zeal and active virtues emulate! Soon should proud Carillon be humbled low, nor Montcalm's self prevent the avenging blow. London Magazine, 1759. But at last the tide turned. In 1757 William Pitt forced his way to the leadership of the government in England, and at once formed a comprehensive plan for a combined attack on the French forts in America. The first point of attack was Louisburg, which had been ceded back to France in 1748, and in the spring of 1758 a strong expedition under Lord Amherst was dispatched against it. The siege commenced June 8, the very day of the disaster at Ticonderoga, and after a tremendous bombardment, which destroyed the town and badly breached the fortress, the garrison, numbering nearly 6,000, surrendered July 26, 1758. On the late successful expedition against Louisburg, July 26, 1758, by Francis Hopkinson. At length 'tis done, the glorious conflict's done, and British valor hath the conquest won. Success our arms, our heroes' honor crowns, and Louisburg an English monarch owns. Swift to the scene where late the valiant fought, waft me, ye muses, on the wings of thought, that awful scene where the dread god of war o'er field of death rolled his triumphant car. There yet, with fancy's eye, methinks I view the pressing throng, the fierce assault renew, with dauntless front advance and boldly brave the cannon's thunder and the expecting grave. On yonder cliff, high hanging o'er the deep, where trembling joy climbs the darksome steep, Britannia, lonely sitting, from afar waits the event and overlooks the war. Thence rolls her eager eyes, wandering eyes about in all the dread anxiety of doubt, sees her fierce sons, her foes, with vengeance smite, grasp deathless honors and maintain the fight. Whilst thus her breast alternate passions sway, and hope and fear wear the slow hours away, see, from the realms of everlasting light, a radiant form wings her aerial flight. The palm she carries, and the crown she wears, plainly denote 'tis victory appears. Her crimson vestment loosely flows behind, the clouds her chariot, and the wings her wind. Trumpets shrill sounding all around her play, and laureled honors gild her azure way. Now she alights, the trumpets cease to sound, her presence spreads, expecting silence round, and thus she speaks, whilst from her heavenly face effulgent glories brighten all the place. Britannia, hail! Thine is at length the day, and lasting triumphs shall thy cares repay. Thy godlike sons by this their names shall raise, and tongues remote shall joy to swell their praise. I to the listening world shall soon proclaim of Wolfe's brave deeds the never-dying fame, and swell with glory Amherst's patriot name. Such are the heroes that shall ever bring wealth to their country, honor to their king. Opposing foes in vain attempt to quell the native fires that in such bosoms dwell. To thee with joy this laurel I resign. Smile, smile, Britannia, victory is thine. Long may it flourish on thy sacred brow, long may thy foes a forced subjection know. See, see their power, their boasted power decline. Rejoice, Britannia, victory is thine. Give your loose canvas to the breezes free, ye floating thunders, bulwarks of the sea. Go, bear the joyful tidings to your king, and in the voice of war declare 'tis victory you bring. Let the wild crowd that catch the breath of fame in mad huzzas their ruder joy proclaim. Let their loud thanks to heaven in flames ascend, while mingling shouts the azure concave rend. But let the few whom reason makes more wise, with glowing gratitude uplift their eyes. Oh, let their breasts dilate with sober joy, let pious praise their hearts and tongues employ. To bless our God with me let all unite. He guides the conquering sword, he governs the fight. Francis Hopkinson. End of section 37.